Okay, one of the first questions I get asked when they know after 53 years I've retired is, do I miss it? No. Okay, just so you know, I don't miss that at all. The other thing is, I've always wanted to get up in front and button my coat like they do in movies and on TV. Right? So, yeah, I don't know what I can say about this. It says discussion. I'm hoping that you have a lot of answers because I have a lot of questions. Okay, and it did say Q&A. One of the ways I want to begin is back in 1946, I think it was, when Theodor Adorno said that after Auschwitz you couldn't write poetry, but then after that he admitted he was wrong, okay, and said that one could or should, of course, do it just as much as the people who are being tortured have a right to scream. All right? Elie Wiesel essentially said the same thing. After the television show Holocaust, he said, think about it. Entertainment. The Holocaust is entertainment. You can't do that. Right? And then a little after that he said, but if you don't do that, right, how are people going to remember? Now let's flash forward here to 2024 after 80-some years and maybe 400 or 500 feature or feature films about the Holocaust. Obviously, you can make a movie about the Holocaust. The question is, should you, even 80 years later? How do you manage the ethical questions involved, the ethical issues of making a film, which even a documentary would be entertaining, making a film about unbelievable suffering? That was foremost, I believe, in the director's mind when Jonathan Glazer made this film. Let me put this down. And he chose a unique solution by never showing the Holocaust itself. Okay, the misery, the torture, the shooting, the trauma, okay, of the victims afterwards. None of that is in the movie. It's all in the background beyond the fence, right? Instead, he's brought the Holocaust not through the victims to us, but through the perpetrators. How do movies function? They function by bringing us into a film and having us identify. Now, we have a dilemma here. Are we going to identify with Rudolf Höss, with Hedwig, with any of these officials? We really can't. And it's up to Glazer to prevent us from doing that. Because if we do that, okay, we then become the perpetrator. And on the one hand, I think that's a message he wants to give us. Right? If we go back, I'll jump back 30 years to a film called Our Hitler, okay, in which the director was attempting to show that there's a Hitler in everyone. There's this murdering beast monster in everyone, right? Is that true now in this film? If we identify in the film with Höss or any of the characters, we of course are admitting okay, our complicity, not in what went on 80 years ago, that was 80 years ago, but our complicity in anything like this that could be going on today, or 10 years ago, or 20 years ago, however we want to look at the misery in the world. As I say, that was a dilemma for him. He wants that message. At the same time, he also wants us to sit there and, okay, look at the perpetrators themselves, okay, and try to understand, even if it's impossible to understand, how they could go on living the lives they lived with 100 meters away, not even that, to the fence. It was about 30 meters to that fence, knowing what was happening on the other side. Right? If you think about scenes in the film, you have Hus telling his horse he's going to miss his horse. Okay? Maybe that day 50,000 people were murdered, right, at his command on the other side, but he's going to miss his horse. All right? His one brush with the reality of the death going on when he's in the river causes him to flee from the river, grab his kids, they're scrubbed down, and he, of course, goes and bathes or washes himself. I mean, there's a real, I guess, naturalism to the one side of the wall that in some way is disguising the reality of what's on the other side. How do we know what's on the other side? One, of course, we see, I think, one belch of fire, and we see the watchtower. But we see it in another way, or rather we hear it. Throughout this film, right, there's an audio track of the drones, there's a constant drone going on, gunshots, even some voices, some screams that comprise the soundtrack of where, think about the music in the film. There isn't any, except at the very beginning, the very end, and during the night vision scenes. It's the only time there's music. Right? There was supposed to be more, but the director and his producer decided to keep out the music that the composer Mika Levy had composed for the movie. They left it at the beginning and the end, but at other moments they had it in and took it out because they thought it distracted from the naturalism of the film. Okay? I don't know how much you want to know about Holocaust films. You probably want to know more about this, but as long as I'm up here, let me tell you, okay, there are, as I mentioned, 400 or 500 feature films. We can add another 500 documentaries, and then beyond that, we can add the short witness statements that have been filmed over the last 80 years. Okay, they run the gamut from films that take place in Auschwitz, films that take place in the Warsaw Ghetto, films that take place in France, Denmark, Austria, what is now either the Czech Republic or Slovakia, so Czechoslovakia, of the Jewish populations or Jewish characters hiding, okay, either hiding in plain sight, trying to escape. Holocaust films include films of trauma, those that take place after the Holocaust. Think of Sophie's Choice, The Pawnbroker, films that are less well known, Adam Resurrected, it's an Israeli film. Films that deal with the trauma that survivors have, that the guilt they may be feeling, okay, that they survived and someone else didn't. Okay? There's just genre and subgenre that we can list, these 500 films, and then along come 2 films that I think say, that bracket all of Holocaust cinema and say, where do we go from here? The first was 2015, which was Son of Saul, which takes a Holocaust Auschwitz experience into one that's experiential for us, right? We actually experience what a prisoner in Auschwitz went through in that particular film. Okay, and then the other bookend is the film we just saw, a film which takes place near Auschwitz but never shows us what anyone in Auschwitz was experiencing. If you haven't seen Son of Saul, go home and stream it, all right? It will give you the other end of this film, all right? Anyway, what are your questions, or what are your comments? I don't really need questions, but I know you want to say something about the film. Mm-hmm. Okay.
I just have a kind of 2-part question.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was in college, our final project, we could do a creative exercise, and I wanted to adapt a book, fiction or nonfiction, to a screenplay. And this was one of my options. And I decided not to do, or I didn't decide not to do it, but the chair of the history department advised me strongly not to do it because my pitch was from the perspective of the Haas children, not the marriage, not Rudolf Haas, but the children living in that house. And I'm curious what your opinion is, just generally on Holocaust cinema from the point of view of children, or exclusively from the point of view of children, and then how this movie specifically would have been different and maybe negatively impacted, or if you think positively impacted, if it was from the point of view of the children rather than Rudolf Haas himself and his wife more so.
Okay, there are films from the point of view of the victims of the Holocaust. Run Boy Run, maybe it's a Polish film about 4 years old, comes to mind immediately. And it's how he looks at the Holocaust 50 years later when he wrote his memoirs, obviously, but how a child would have looked at what was going on in what he remembers. Waiting for Anya does the same thing. That is a French film in which, but again, we're looking at it from a young girl who's helping her family, her siblings, and a few other kids escape. It's a thrilling type movie. I can't think of any that show the Holocaust from the perspective of a child who was the child of a perpetrator. Okay, now what would that do to this film? I really can't answer that on the spot. I think that your professor was probably wise, especially given that probably until recently, and maybe still not yet, okay, it's quite fraught to make a film, okay, about the Holocaust. And it always goes back to, okay, Elie Wiesel, the Holocaust as entertainment. Think about it. is that, I mean, we do have an ethical responsibility not to use people's suffering as entertainment. Think about it this way. You have the Islamic and Jewish tradition. We don't make visual idols, right, out of God. Right? And I think you're running into that same thing when you're trying to involve people in the Holocaust, tell them not to forget, but you put it into a genre. And as soon as you put something into a genre, it entertains. And I think that's where Jonathan Glazer has really performed a service. I don't think this film is entertaining in any way, at least personally, okay? I don't get involved in thinking, oh, what's going to happen to Hedwig? Or gee, look at Jonathan, I wonder if he's going to be punished. Right? None of that enters my mind. I just don't feel empathetically connected to the characters. And I think that's a real service that he's performed in the film.
One of the things that so impressed me is the following: the juxtaposition of the deep, deep domesticity of this family, and beyond the domesticity, what you mentioned, Huss spoke to his horse. The mother constantly exposed the children to the horticultural delights around them, the flowers, etc. And in a line that she used was, at the end of the war, they were going to farm. So that's one side. The other side is a deep, deep trait of humanity. When people lose their moral and ethical compasses in order to have power, and they become inebriated with power, and all constraints drift away in order for them to retain power. And that's the other side. The people involved were nothing but statistical numbers that were being gassed to death beyond the fence. And to end, just one observation, and I will probably step on toes when I say that, when I say what I'm going to. In American political life today, we're seeing exactly the same thing with the vitality and survival of the American Republic to people who say the normality of what was once our lives is starting to change, and the door has been opened to all sorts of other possibilities.
Okay, very good comments, and I would agree with everything you said. As a professor of 53 years, I never bring politics into my courses though, but you certainly didn't step on my toes. So I thank you for your comments. One thing here, I don't know if any of you saw a film that critics hated, cultural critics like I didn't like, is The Boy in the Striped Pajamas, which does the exact same thing, or attempts to do the exact same thing that Zone of Interest is trying, which is tell the story of the Holocaust from the point of view of the family, okay, of the perpetrators, to show their sort of normal life, okay, as opposed to showing the death and destruction. Of course, that film includes looking at Auschwitz, and it also includes, by the way, point of view of the boy, right? And that film, of course, fails, just flops, because it does use the gimmicks that are available to a director to create empathy, right? And so when you get to the end of that film, you think, I don't think I should really feel bad for this family, and yet you do. Right? I remember seeing another film that you probably won't know, called Autumn Milk, a German film, a Bavarian film. And at the end, I was tearing up, choking and sort of tearing up. I got so angry at the film, because here was a film about essentially the Nazi regime. The Holocaust only came in tangentially, but it was there. And I'm tearing up and I'm thinking, how dare a director make a movie that makes me emotional about these Germans that perpetrated all of this death. But, okay, I saw a hand. And I think there was one, yeah. Oh, okay, go ahead.
Bringing it closer to where we are, as I watched this, I thought of the similarities and maybe some differences between Killers of the Flower Moon, which was also focused on the perpetrators and the racism at the center of it, that they could feel no remorse about killing others. And then there was Oppenheimer, which is also about industrial killing, I guess you could say. And also, it didn't show any of the horror. So I wonder what you think that says about the time we're living in, that we're seeing these kinds of films.
Yeah, we're seeing films that don't show the horror. I would say that that's a good sign, in that we know the horror is there. The films don't shy away from telling us about the horror. It's just they're not showing it to us, okay? They're not sensationalizing it for the sake of making a buck. Okay, that would be my comment there. Why is it happening today? I have no idea. I think to see why a social movement or a particular ideology is present in what's being made requires 10, 15 years to sit with us, and then we can look back and say, this is what our era was about. It's certainly about what was mentioned before, okay, that normalcy seems to be dead, or have changed to the point of being something that's scary. And maybe there's a connection there, I don't know, okay?
Reimer.
Hi, I'm way up here.
Robert.
Okay.
You know, I just saw a lot of contradictions in this film. I'm confused at the end when he was vomiting. Would you talk about that?
Okay, when he's vomiting, one way we can look at that is it occurs right after he tells his wife that this operation has been named for him. At the same time, and he says that after, I'm not sure how I'm going to do this, how am I going, and not from a moral thing, but from a practical standpoint. How am I going to kill all these people? You know, it isn't, gee, how can I do that? That's not in me. It's, do I have the technical equipment to do this? And then he proudly tells his wife, and they've named the operation for me. And then he goes out into the hall, and maybe something in his head is fighting something somewhere else in his psyche, right? The good angel, the bad angel, I don't know. But he throws up. I don't think he knows why he's throwing up. Right? And I think that's what Glazer wants to show, or the actor wants to show here. Okay? And I bring that up because he throws up, and then we have the flash forward to the scenes that are actually ubiquitous in a lot of documentaries of the showcase of shoes, the showcase of suitcases, right? These were maybe from the Auschwitz Holocaust Museum. You can go to Washington and you can see those. But he includes that. That's his one mention of where did all of this lead. It led to the absence of Jews, right? You show these not to talk about the Holocaust, but to talk about absence, right? And the absence of the people who died, right? Well, then we cut back to the film proper, and we go through the staircase, right? And he just goes into the void. Right? We could have ended this film how? Telling us what happened to Hus, what happened to Hedwig, etc. How many people were killed, etc., etc. But it doesn't. It doesn't take that cliche of Holocaust movies. It just has Hus going into this sort of black hole, right? After he has thrown up. Yeah.
Hi, it's Sam. How you doing?
Yeah, hi, Sam.
This is a two-part question. It's going to be difficult because my mouth is so dry. I wish I had some water. To the gentleman up in front who was going to make a film about the children of the past, I want to say that this film does spend 2 or 3 scenes with the children of the past, and there's even a scene with the 2 boys. I think it's the only scene where the boy where a character in that family can actually hear an order from the camp of someone about to be executed or killed, or I think he says drown him in the river. And it's the only time in the movie I was able to actually hear something from the camp, and it only happens to the child. So I don't know what Glazer was thinking there, but the other thing, and I don't know if anyone noticed this, you may have mentioned Schindler's List while I was out, I'm not sure, but the scenes with the Jewish girl who goes out at night, and it seems like she's a negative image. I mean, it's a incredible visual where you see her, obviously, you know what I'm talking about. She's at nighttime. That scene reminded me so much of the incredible scene from Schindler's List where you see the girl in red. The film was in black and white, but the only time in Schindler's List, famously, that you see color is a little girl escaping or trying to escape the genocide. And I almost wonder if the scenes in this movie were sort of a shout out to that, because it seemed very sort of experimental, and it was as if the story of the movie was leaving and then coming back. If you could address that, and I was a little confused also what was happening. I had to ask my partner, what was she actually doing? But I was as fascinated with the way it was filmed, but with the way Glazer shot those scenes.
Okay, I think it was shot with my technical expertise isn't up that high, but I think it was shot with just a night vision camera.
But I guess I was thinking more symbolically, what was he going for?
Oh yeah, no.
Just showing her illuminated and everything else was nighttime.
Right, and I think that was then in stark contrast to the audio. Remember what the audio is doing, which is telling the fairy tale of Hansel and Gretel.
Yeah.
All right. And so, I agree with you that Glazer's being very experimental there, but he's being experimental, I think, through most of the movie. Okay, now, what is he doing with this? It comes back later don't know if you caught it at the end when someone is going to be shot, or no, thrown in the river and drowned because they stole an apple. They fought over an apple. Okay, and that then goes back to what's occurring in this particular thing. But why is he bringing that in the way he does? I think it's to give that fairy tale quality in contrast to the fairy tale that's being read. Because both times it comes up, it's the fairy tale that's in the background. Now, I haven't really thought about connecting Hansel and Gretel to the Holocaust here, and I just don't know if I'd want to. But now let's go back to the two boys. I assume you're referring to the scene where the older brother locks the other brother in the greenhouse?
No, I'm thinking of a scene in the bedroom where he's listening to the man say, shoot them or drown him in the river. He's listening through the window, and then he closes the window.
He's throwing dice. It's when he was playing in that room throwing dice.
The two little boys. Am I wrong about
Is that
It
the
was
one
just
with
one boy.
One boy, the younger boy.
Yeah, the other scene was when it was the brother locking the younger brother in the greenhouse.
Right, and that one he of course includes because the son has now become a Hitler Youth of some sort, right? So from father to son type thing. Okay.
Time for two more.
Appreciate it. Thanks for being here. So I was thinking two things throughout the film. One you already mentioned with the detachment and the avoidance and kind of that feeling absurd to us as an audience knowing the context in which this film exists. I thought a lot about how the characters moved their bodies, how they moved physically. The wife especially and her mom, it's very bumbling, they're kind of hobbling around, right? And at one point she makes a comment to her mother when she first visits, like, oh, this house looks big, but it's really not all that large, right? And really everything about the way this family moves, it's very, not really awkward, it's just, it sometimes feels like inhuman to me in a way. That might just be me, like, you know, knowing what we're looking at. But I was just wondering if you had any comments on kind of the bumbling nature, like the hobbling, the way these characters move in their little, their zone, their house, the yard, like if you had anything to say about that.
Okay, yeah, I'd have maybe two things to say right there, which is, I agree with you in Hedvig's walking.
Yeah.
I found her, and I believe this is really intentional and maybe comes out of the directors doing research. I don't know because I didn't research her. But I gather since she wanted to farm this land, that she maybe comes from that type of tradition. But to me, her awkwardness was not so much awkwardness as just dumpiness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right.
I didn't
She. Well, I don't want to use it because it sounds negative. But she's a hausfrau, right? And that's how a hausfrau who's wearing clogs is going to walk, right? You really wouldn't imagine her in a fine dress at that reception that Rudolph was at, right? She just wouldn't have fit in there, I don't think. The other thing I would say is that there actually was no camera filming this, no single camera filming this the way most movies are shot. Instead, there were individual hidden cameras or unobtrusive cameras throughout the house. I think there were 10 of them, all right? And I think then the way people walked wasn't one of which they're aware of a cameraman up there and they have to do a particular thing. They're just doing their thing as this movie is going on, including the kids or the servants or what have you. Okay? So that may be a result of the way it was filmed also. But definitely I think she was characterized as a farmer's wife type.
and grandmother came to visit. She seemed very pleased to be there, and then she just left. Was that a moral statement on her part?
I think the film could have been clearer about that, and I don't want to put words into the film, but I think you're correct. And the reason I would say that is I'm looking at her reaction when she's lying in the chair. And there's smoke, noise. We don't see the chimney at that time, but we had seen it earlier. And I think somehow maybe the smell got to her. You look at her, and there has to be a smell, right, of burning flesh that certainly would not have, the yard here would not have been spared of that. And I think suddenly she felt not maybe moral, she just didn't want to be there. It was an unpleasant place to be for her. I think that had a lot to do with that. But it may have been suddenly a moral awakening. I just don't think so, because she was anti-Semitic. The film makes clear she's anti-Semitic. And so I don't think that would have bothered her. Remember what she says? I wonder if Mrs. Silverman is there. And that, who's that? Oh, she's the woman whose curtains I tried to buy.
Yeah.
Right? So, I mean, that's a real negative comment on her. So I think maybe she just didn't like the smell or the
Grossed out.
being there, you know, in person, and really having realized, hey, this is what's happening, right? They're being killed, they're being murdered.
Okay, we're gonna have to call it.
Okay, we had one more.
We'll do one more.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for doing this, by the way. My question is based off of what you said earlier. I know that you have strong opinions on this, but I've always been curious about how, like, Germany's got to be like tens of millions of people at the time, and I'm guessing before the Nazism movement, there's got to be like normal people just living their lives. So, about your thoughts on empathizing with the people, are there any movies that have like gone about how normal people were radicalized and viewing the whole movement from their perspective, and what are your thoughts on that? And also, I have a second question. This is kind of, I'm cheating here. I know this is supposed to be the last question. But you also said that since this is a very sensitive topic and it's very tough to like categorize this as entertainment or not. But one movie that really came to my mind was Life is Beautiful. So that was very well done. It was like one of the funniest movies I've seen.
Mm-hmm.
It broke my heart, and it also like warmed my heart at the same time. And I just wanted to know your opinions on that, and are we still in a place that we can make movies like those?
Okay, well, I'll start with the second question. And Roberto Benigni definitely wanted to warm our hearts. Okay, he also took a novel that had been written by an East German called Naked Among Wolves, and had been made into a movie back in the 60s in East Germany, and radically changed it except for, okay, protecting a young boy in a concentration camp, okay? I think what saves the movie, if it can be saved, is Benigni and the first half of the movie, in which it's clear this is a fairy tale. We're not supposed to look at the concentration camp as real, okay? It is pure fantasy. And Benigni defended himself by saying that he could have made, he could write a treatise on the Holocaust, he could make a really serious movie about the Holocaust, but he wanted to make a comedy because he wanted to reach people. And if you reach people through entertainment, is it wrong? That's where the ethical question comes in, right? Do we want to reach those people, and how do we do it? And maybe comedy is the way. Okay, by the way, there's a lot of comedies, or not a lot, but there's a number of comedies about the Holocaust. Your first question had to do with, once more.
Empathizing with the perpetrators at some level.
Oh, yeah.
How they got
Yeah,
into that.
there are films about good Germans. There are films about Germany at the time, pre-Holocaust, leading into the Holocaust. Germans who hid Jews, who tried to protect Jews. And these are based on true stories or memoirs of Jews who were protected that way. And so there's a certain amount of believability to them. And then there are also some, I'm thinking of one, Germany Pale Mother, in which, yes, here we have normal Germans, and we see how at least the husband is being radicalized into accepting the Nazi way, okay, the Nazi ideology, because of the propaganda one is hearing or having to live through. So there are such films, yes. The Germans aren't a bad people, right? I mean, even back in the 30s, it's just they went along with this. And I'll close with one comment. We had Hedwig up here. According to this movie, even though there's not much coming out of it, she knew what was going on. I don't know if you know what happened to her afterward. Okay, Rudolph was hanged, she remarried, she moved to the United States and died when she was 90 years old. Okay, so the Statue of Liberty does welcome some people, right? Just not always the right ones. So, thank you.
All right, thank you, Robert.